Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, a show where I discuss true crime cases involving the military and veteran community. And I do that all with the hope of reminding you to remain vigilant always. Today, I am bringing you a headlines episode that is long overdue. And the 4 cases I have for you all seem to have a shock value to them. And it's not all in a bad way. My first case is an update to a previous story that I covered in my last headlines episode. And that's the story of Navy Reservist David Varela. Spoiler alert, he was captured, thank goodness. But it's not so much that he was captured, but how he was captured that truly fascinated and shocked me at the same time. In this headlines episode, I also cover 3 other domestic violence cases. One is shocking because the victim survived despite the perpetrator's actions. Another DV case is shocking because of how quickly leadership acted in the case that ultimately led to an arrest a couple months later. And the final story is shocking because of the sheer violence involved. True Crime Army, this is a really heavy episode about domestic violence, so please strap in. I do want to give everyone a heads up that we are going into the summer vacation, and I will likely focus my future episodes, at least in the summer months, on headline-type cases or even mini episodes, because I will be spending a lot more time with my kiddos. And as they say, we only get 18 summers with our kids when they're little, and my little one is about to turn 5. And listen, I am finally going to take advantage of my summer with the girls, and I know that I've been kind of a workaholic in the last several years, and I just want to spend time with them. I hope that you will also be able to take some time off this summer to enjoy it with your loved ones. With that, let's get into today's headlines case. Today, I have cases involving members of the Navy and Air Force Reserve, as well as an active duty airman case and an Army retiree case. Now, let's dig in.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
True Crime Army, I have a major update in the case of David Varela. I know, I did give you the spoiler in the beginning, but here we are. I told you about David in my April headlines episode. He's the Navy reservist accused of murdering his wife, Lina Guerra, in hiding her body inside a freezer at their home in Norfolk, Virginia. When I originally covered this case, authorities believed that Varela had fled the country shortly after his wife's body was discovered on February 5, 2026. Investigators quickly zeroed in on Hong Kong after emergency disclosure requests tied to WhatsApp location data showed activity there. What made the situation especially complicated was the fact that Varela reportedly had no known ties to Hong Kong or China, which raised concerns that he intentionally chose a location where extradition issues could become difficult. But the manhunt is officially over. On April 15, 2026, FBI Director Kash Patel publicly announced that Varela had been captured overseas after what authorities described as a 2-month international manhunt. The FBI, Homeland Security Investigations, NCIS, and other federal agencies worked together to locate and apprehend Varela. Interestingly, officials did not publicly disclose the exact country or location where Varela was ultimately arrested, even though investigators had long believed that he fled through or into Hong Kong. But get this. As reported by WTKR News 3, the U.S. Marshals moved in on Varela in Hong Kong after a News 3 investigator made contact with him over video chat. What? Yes, listen up, y'all. News 3 reported that investigator Margaret Kavanaugh reached out to Varela in a video call via an encrypted messaging app. Varela answered, but quickly covered the camera and refused to answer further questions. Less than a week after this video call took place, Varela was taken into custody by the U.S. Marshals. Now listen, when I read this, I was like, wait, what exactly happened? Well, listen, WTKR News 3 covered Varela's arrest and extradition in their podcast, True Crime 757. But the thing is that they were the ones that basically cracked this case and found Varela. It was when I was listening to their coverage that I discovered that a few Russian women who were touring in Hong Kong met Varela. one of the women went on a date with the man who used his real name. No kidding, this man is wanted for murder, and he meets women, and tells them that his name is David Varela. Well, the woman began to have romantic feelings for the guy, but something about him just felt off. So one of her friends went online and found that a man named David Varela, who looked just like the guy, was wanted in the United States for murder. That friend reached out to the reporter that had covered Varela's case the most. That communication began as a direct message on Instagram. The friend even sent the reporter a picture that she snagged of Varela overseas. And that's how they made the connection. The friend's message said, quote, "Hi, I guess I know where David Varela is. My friend met him at the Victoria Peak tram," end quote. Margaret Kavanaugh reached out to the woman and she provided more information. The Russian woman said that she and her friend were waiting in line at an attraction when Varela introduced himself as David and said he was looking for a Russian wife. They spoke for about 20 minutes and exchanged numbers, and they kept in contact via text. David shared he was looking for a job and had been in Hong Kong for a month. And the thing about this guy is that he did not shy away from talking about his actual life. He said he was from Miami, Florida, and served in the military. So when investigator Margaret Kavanaugh reached out to Varela over video chat, he had no clue that he was answering her call. He probably thought he was answering another woman's call. And right off the bat, his face is showing in the video. And Kavanaugh, with her curly hair, she asks, "Hey, listen, do you have any comment about the charges involving your wife, Lena?" Varela immediately covers the phone, hangs up, and blocks the number. I am happy to report that after his arrest, Varela has successfully been extradited back to California to face federal charges for fleeing. And then from there, he was extradited to Virginia to face state murder charges. As reported by the same report that I read, WTKR, Varela has also been charged by the military with desertion. The preliminary hearing has been set for July 21st. Now, before I end this segment, I just want to give a shout out to the investigative reporters who made this arrest and extradition possible. John Sham is the digital director at WTKR, and together with Margaret Kavanaugh, they have been working this case nonstop. But Margaret seems to be the glue that keeps this case together, and she also worked with Lena's family to get her ashes back to Colombia. She really was the turning point for why and how this arrest was possible, never giving up on Lena or her family. So shout out to all the people doing their thing out there and helping to solve cases. I wanted to put this next case on your radar, even though it started back in 2024 and an arrest was made in 2025 and the case is still not done. And I wanted to put it on your radar because the case has been officially docketed in federal court for November 2nd, 2026. This case started with the disappearance of 21-year-old Sahela Sangrait out of South Dakota. Sahela, who went by the name Toka Win and the name Shy, vanished in August of 2024. Her family and community searched for answers in the wake of her disappearance. They were passing out flyers and attempting to find answers. Sahela's case drew even more concerns as the discussion around missing Indigenous women spread throughout the United States. Many feared that Sahela's whereabouts would never be known. But then, in early March 2025, the case took a devastating turn. A hiker walking in a remote area south of Hill City, South Dakota, near the Pennington and Custer County lines, saw what appeared to be two legs sticking out of the ground. The hiker freaked out but didn't have cell service, so they drove out until they could call authorities. Authorities returned to the location to find the two human legs, and the remainder of the body was covered by a coffee table and a log. Once those items were removed, they found a badly decomposed body. Through dental records, investigators later confirmed the remains found belonged to Sahela Sangrait. And shortly thereafter, authorities announced something else. They had made an arrest. An active duty airman by the name of Quintarius Chappelle was charged with murder in federal court. Specifically, he was charged in the District of South Dakota Western Division. 24-year-old Chappelle was assigned to the 28th Maintenance Squadron at Ellsworth Air Force Base near Rapid City. Although Chappelle lives in Box Elder, federal authorities believe that Sahela was actually killed on base and then transported off base, where her remains were discovered on federal land. Now, one of the biggest frustrations in this case is that many of the court documents were sealed, meaning that a lot of the specifics, including how Sahela died and what evidence ties Chappelle to the murder, well, those were not immediately made public. But listen, y'all, I did some digging, and I got my hands on the arraignment and detention transcript that revealed some very important details. Many of the details contained in this headline story were found in that transcript, and most of it was revealed when a sergeant with the Pennington County Sheriff's Office took the stand. So here goes. Isabella Arroyo, who is Sahela's sister, told authorities at the time of the missing persons report that Sahela had been in an abusive relationship with an airman at Ellsworth Air Force Base. Isabella only knew the airman by his last name, Chappelle, and the last time that she had made any contact with Sahela was in the early morning hours of August 11th, 2024. Armed with this information and using the last name Chappelle, authorities looked into their system and discovered that they had made contact with someone named Quintarius Chappelle on August 12, 2024. But before I tell you about the interaction between Chappelle and the police on that date, I have to tell you what happened right before this contact. You see, on August 11, 2024, Airman Quintarius Chappelle showed up to work with obvious scratches on his face. His supervisors knew that he had a history of domestic violence assaults that were actively being investigated by OSI. So when he walks in with scratches all over his face, they're like, hey, come here. How did you get those scratches on your face? Chappelle immediately told them, hey, listen, last night I was jumped, and that's how I got scratched on my face. His supervisors were like, okay, if that's true, did you report this to law enforcement? Chappelle said no. So they were like, okay, so if you didn't already report this, we're going to take you down to the station so that you can make the report. And just like that, one of the supervisors, no kidding, drove Chappelle to the Rapid City Police Department in uniform to make the report. When Chappelle made his report, he said he was the victim of an attempted robbery the previous night, August 11th, 2024. However, when pressed for further information, he was unable to give any details about the alleged suspects. Because he was now reporting a crime as the victim and he had visible scratches on his face, guess what happened? Authorities documented the scratches by taking pictures of his face. After that report was filed, detectives attempted to contact Chappelle to look into the attempted robbery further, but he never returned their calls. After various failed attempts, the case was closed. But wait, get this. It turned out that Box Elder PD had been called to Chappelle's residence for a domestic disturbance on August 10th at around 8 p.m. But when they arrived and knocked, no one answered. And as reported by a news source, that call or that domestic violence call or the domestic disturbance call was called in by a neighbor. So when authorities knocked and didn't get an answer, they left and they didn't follow up. However, after Sahela's body was discovered months later, they did execute a search warrant for Chappelle's residence. And inside his residence, they found 2 coffee tables that matched the coffee table found covering Sahela's deceased body. A search of Chappelle's phone also discovered a text message to someone after August 11th, 2024, where Chappelle told someone that a woman could no longer blackmail him. In the course of their investigation, authorities learned that Chappelle was in the process of being discharged from the Air Force, and he was in the process of discharge due to a domestic violence investigation involving Chappelle's ex-wife or soon-to-be ex-wife. The sergeant on the stand appears to be unclear on this particular fact, whether he was still married or divorced by this time. The sergeant revealed that in addition to this OSI domestic violence investigation, multiple people obtained protective orders against Chappelle because he had made statements about a mass shooting at work. Exactly what was allegedly said is unclear to me, but for clarity, I'm just going to read you the transcript. An investigator testified during this hearing that, quote, Mr. Chappelle had made a comment to somebody, something to the effect of a mass shooting at work that was being investigated. And during that investigation by OSI, multiple individuals were scared enough of these comments that they ended up getting protection orders against Mr. Chappelle, end quote. Additionally, when OSI was investigating Chappelle, apparently there was mention of Chappelle having a hit list of sorts. And while a physical hit list was never found, apparently it did involve his supervisors. It's also reported that one of Chappelle's supervisors overheard him talking to himself that he wanted to cut off the heads of OSI agents. Now, during my review of the detention hearing transcript, I did find additional information presented by the judge about Chappelle that is concerning. In making his pretrial detention determination, the judge stated that while Chappelle has no criminal convictions, no gang affiliations, and no substance abuse history, he had formally been charged by the military for an aggravated assault for strangulation that occurred in February of 2024. The judge does mention a court-martial, but never reveals a final verdict, except to say that Chappelle was disciplined for this misconduct in November of 2024, which the judge points out was after Sahela was killed. With that, the judge ruled in favor of continued pretrial detention. I do want to add that much of the files in Chappelle's case do remain sealed, so I couldn't see a lot of it. But I did discover that recently, in April of 2026, the defense filed a motion to suppress information in the case. And in that motion, they were specifically seeking to suppress digital information by Apple, Twitter, Google, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Meta, and mid-continent communications. The judge ended up granting this motion to suppress on May 5th, 2026. So I guess we will not be hearing any of that social media information at trial. Although it is possible that that information will come into trial via other means, like a witness, but we shall see. As of this recording, the judge put out the scheduling order that shows trial beginning in early November 2026. But y'all, just as I was wrapping up this case review, I discovered that another person has been charged in connection with Sahela's case. A man named Drew Durand. I don't know whether he's in the military or not. I haven't found that, but he has been charged. So I do want you to know that as soon as I discovered there was another person involved in this case, I sped on over to see what documents I could search, and some of them were not sealed, but some of them were. So what did I discover in Durand's case? This guy, Drew Durand, is charged with accessory after the fact and misprision of a felony. For accessory after the fact, the redacted indictment charges him with accessory after the fact for allegedly knowing that a murder had been committed and then receiving, relieving, comforting, and assisting the offender in order to hinder and prevent the offender's trial and punishment. With regards to misprision of a felony, the indictment continues to state that the man, allegedly having knowledge that a murder was committed, concealed the murder and failed to report it to authorities. The file is sparse and sealed, but that being said, Durand's case was continued and is on the docket to begin after Chappelle's trial. Durand's trial is officially set to begin on December 1st, 2026. This next story out of Stewart County, Tennessee, feels like something straight out of a movie. In early May 2026, authorities launched a massive multi-agency manhunt for a retired Army Special Forces veteran named Craig Berry. This manhunt was launched after investigators say that Berry brutally attacked and shot his wife, then disappeared into the woods wearing camouflage and carrying weapons and ammunition. And because Berry had extensive military survival training, law enforcement warned the public this was not going to be a normal fugitive search. Berry was 53 years old and lived near Dover, Tennessee, a heavily wooded area near the Kentucky border. According to investigators, the violence began late on the night of April 30th, 2026, inside the couple's house. Authorities later said that Berry allegedly beat and tried to strangle his wife during a domestic altercation. At some point, the woman miraculously managed to get away and she fled towards her vehicle. But investigators say that Berry shot her as she attempted to escape. And somehow, despite being shot in the neck and suffering what authorities described as life-threatening injuries, the woman survived. According to Stewart County Sheriff Frankie Gray, Berry's wife managed to drive away from the scene after being shot. But Berry wasn't done. He jumped into a different vehicle and followed behind her. Thankfully, he crashed and totaled his car while his wife was able to escape. However, by the time deputies arrived at the crash site, Berry had vanished into the woods. Almost immediately, law enforcement realized they were dealing with an unusually dangerous fugitive. Authorities described Berry as a retired Army Special Forces veteran, an excellent swimmer and diver, physically fit, armed with at least one handgun and extra ammo, and extensively trained in survival tactics. And honestly, you can actually hear the concern in the way investigators talked about this guy publicly. This wasn't just suspect fled into the woods. Officials openly warned residents to lock their doors, report suspicious activity immediately, and stay alert because Berry had the training and capability to survive off-grid for an extended period of time. Authorities also said that Barry had served in the Army from 1992 until 2016, including as an infantryman and Special Forces medical sergeant. He reportedly deployed to Iraq 4 times between 2003 and 2014. And this background, as you can imagine, shaped the entire manhunt. The search quickly escalated into a major operation involving multiple agencies, including the Sheriff's Office, the Highway Patrol, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, U.S. Marshals, K-9 units, helicopters, and even thermal imaging aircraft. And at one point, authorities revealed a blurry kind of trail camera image showing a man believed to be Barry moving through the woods in camouflage. I mean, it actually looks like an alien. Investigators also said that they believed that Barry no longer had a cell phone, which made tracking him even harder. For nearly a week, residents in this area lived with the fear that an armed and highly trained fugitive was somewhere nearby in the woods. But then, on May 6, 2026, the manhunt came to a sudden end. Authorities found Barry dead in a wooded area near Dover, and it wasn't far from where he had been last seen. According to the Stewart County Sheriff's Office and U.S. Marshals, initial evidence indicated that Barry died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Investigators later said the body was discovered only about a quarter mile from his in-laws' house, though the sheriff said there was no indication that Barry intended to harm the in-laws. Authorities also stated there was no evidence that anyone had helped Barry after he fled into the woods. And here's one detail that really stood out to me. Investigators believe that Barry may have died fairly early into the manhunt, possibly not long after fleeing. But listen, because of the wooded terrain and the conditions, search teams simply did not locate him immediately. Sheriff Gray later explained that by the time thermal imaging aircraft searched the area, Barry's body temperature may have already dropped too low for detection equipment to pick up, which is why they didn't find him. Meanwhile, Barry's wife did survive and was later released from the hospital. As for motive, investigators have only hinted at possible underlying financial issues among the couple. Sheriff Gray declined to speculate publicly beyond that. The final headlines case today is one that took place in January of 2025, but it finally reached finality in April of 2026. And it's the murder of Air Force reservist Starmichael Tucker. And Tucker's murder out of Pensacola, Florida, is absolutely horrifying. What this woman endured really broke my heart. According to federal prosecutors, 30-year-old Tucker began dating Charles Carson-Dowdy in October of 2024. How they met or how long they knew each other prior to beginning this dating relationship is unclear to me. However, Charles, who I'm going to be calling Carson for the remainder of this segment, he lived in Mobile, Alabama, and Tucker lived in Pensacola, Florida. Now, initially, I thought, I was like, wow, they live kind of far from each other. But a quick search on Google Maps revealed that the two cities are approximately only 60 miles from each other. Well, at first, the relationship between Tucker and Carson appeared normal. But prosecutors say that over this, 2 to 3 month period, Carson began to harass and even intimidate Tucker. For the holidays in December of 2024, just 2 months into dating, Tucker traveled to California, her home state, to visit family. While she was away, the relationship between her and Carson reportedly deteriorated over text message. Prosecutors say that the two exchanged a series of increasingly heated arguments through text while Tucker was in California and Carson was in Alabama. On January 1st, 2025, Tucker was traveling from California to Florida to return home. Now, during the travel, she was texting with Carson. Whether they were arguing or not, I have no idea. But she was texting with Carson. And during that text message exchange, Carson revealed that during their short relationship, he had secretly viewed her private text messages. Now, that was the end of the road for Tucker. She was like, I am done with this guy. So she attempted to end the relationship with Carson over text message. Well, Carson was not happy about the breakup, and that's when he decided to confront Tucker at her apartment. At home in Alabama, Carson pulled up the Uber app on his phone and requested a ride to Pensacola, Florida. I don't know. I think this guy was kind of like a scrub, didn't have his own car. But anyway, so he grabs an Uber to Pensacola, Florida, and he is armed with a handgun and an extra loaded magazine. He jumps in his Uber and was dropped off in front of Tucker's apartment at the crossings at 9 Mile Road. Tucker had not returned from her vacation yet as she was still traveling, and that's when Carson entered the apartment without Tucker's permission and just waited for her return. While he waited, Carson texted Tucker to inform her that he was in her apartment. And of course, Tucker was freaking out. And when she returned home, sure enough, he was in fact there. Now, what occurred from the 1st of January until the 2nd of January is unclear to me. But on January 2nd, 2025 at 8 p.m., Tucker left her apartment. Carson followed behind her. He didn't want her to leave, but he followed behind her. And that's when they were in the parking lot and he fired a volley of 4 shots directly at Tucker. Tucker collapsed in the parking lot. And that's when Carson walked up to Tucker. And while she lay on the ground, probably mortally shot and wounded, Carson shot her an additional 10 times. He then got into Tucker's Jeep Cherokee and ran the victim over twice, backward and forward, before taking off. Sadly, as you can imagine, Starmichael Tucker, who was only 30 years old and a mom to a young son, she didn't survive. Carson, however, went on the run. Within minutes of committing this gruesome and violent murder, Carson texted a member of Tucker's family stating, quote, "Star is dead," end quote. He then spoke on the phone to someone else and admitted that he shot Tucker 16 times. Carson made his way back to Alabama, but as luck would have it, just as he got over the Alabama line, he got a flat tire and was forced to call roadside assistance. It was through this call that Carson was caught early on and taken into custody in Spanish Fort, Alabama. Inside of the victim's vehicle, authorities discovered the murder weapon. It was revealed in a stipulation of fact that I reviewed that at the time of Tucker's murder, Carson was a convicted felon out of Texas. It did not reveal the actual felony charge, but it just meant that he was not allowed to even have a gun on his person. Now, one important piece of this case is that because Carson crossed state lines to commit this violence, the case fell under federal interstate domestic violence statutes, and that allowed federal prosecutors to pursue charges tied not only to the killing itself, but also to the alleged stalking and harassment leading up to it. That being said, it appeared that in August of 2025, the case was transferred from the state of Florida to a federal case. And I say that simply because the murder occurred in January of 2025, but the federal case shows an indictment dated in August of 2025. So where are we now? In late March 2026, Charles Carson-Dowdy pled guilty to cyberstalking, interstate domestic violence resulting in death, murder through use of a firearm, and felon in possession of a firearm. As of now, Carson-Dowdy faces up to life imprisonment at sentencing. His sentencing hearing is scheduled for August 25th, 2026, before a district judge in Pensacola. Before I end, I do want to tell you a little bit more about the victim, Starmichael Tucker. Starmichael Latrice Tucker was 30 years old. She was originally from California, but attended Florida A&M University, where she played Division I volleyball in the mid-2010s. She was also a senior airman in the 919th Special Operations Medical Squadron assigned to Duke Field in Florida. She was a member of the Air Force Reserve. According to her family, she was 1 semester shy of obtaining her nursing degree. Starmichael's younger sister, Raya, is quoted in ABC News 3 as saying that she didn't notice any red flags, or at least she didn't catch any red flags from Carson while he dated her sister. According to Raya, Carson seemed sweet and they looked happy together. Starmichael's family says they are forever changed since her murder. In the end, Raya had one request, quote, "Just keep us in your gracious prayers," end quote. All right, True Crime Army, thank you so much for listening today to this Headlines episode. Stay tuned for next week. I do have a major case development in a case that I've been following since 2020. That's right, you and I both have been tracking this case since then, and you won't want to miss it. It's going to be a little bit more of a mini episode, but trust me, you want to know about it. Until then, everybody stay safe. Military Murder is a Mama Margot production. The music was created by Ty-Ops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next time.
Mama's working on her podcast. I don't want to.